CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about
I even wanted to read this year. I wanted to read the Orthodox non-Zionist name. They couldn't read their speech because it was the Sabbath.
Yeah. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela.
CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies.
Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. For coming to this rally. It's very important that we give voice to our concerns about media misrepresentation of the situation in Venezuela. And if folks down there could come a little bit closer, I promise. We all bathe today. It's going to be sweet. Come a little closer. Thank you. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Barry Wasletter, and I'm a member of the Toronto Venezuela Solidarity Committee. I will introduce a number of speakers and entertainers who will help to explain why we are all here today. Let me begin by saying that I'm a teacher, a Toronto resident, and a taxpayer, and I'm very angry with the CBC. Why am I angry with the CBC, you ask? I'll tell you. The CBC is the public broadcaster. The CBC is supported by taxes that you and I pay, but the CBC is not telling the truth, the whole truth about Venezuela. The CBC and other mass media in North America have become little more than a mouthpiece for Washington, for Ottawa, for Wall Street, and for Bay Street. They're spreading exaggerations and lies about the progressive, popular, and elected government of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela.
Shame. Shame.
The CBC gives voice only to the violent right-wing opposition in the country. The CBC ignores the election of the Constituent Assembly on July 30th, in which 8 million plus voted to elect the Constituent Assembly. And the CBC ignores the legal mandate to rewrite the Constitution of Venezuela. While Trump cuts off financial credit and Trudeau applauds, the rich are putting the squeeze on the working class of Venezuela. They're hoping to cause discontent and disorder. They're hoping to work up the basis for some kind of a fascist coup, like the one that occurred in Chile in 1973. Well, we say enough is enough. The CBC should stop the abuse. It's time to tell the truth. Now I want to call on a few speakers. They'll take 2 or 3 or 4 minutes apiece, and this will help to tell the story of why we're here. And we hope the CBC can hear us, because we're going to have some chanting at the end of this, and we want them to air this testimony about the real situation in Latin America, in Venezuela, so that the millions of viewers, people who listen to CBC radio as well, can know the other side of the story that is being blocked by the Canadian major media, including the national broadcaster, the CBC. So please warmly welcome our first speaker from Common Frontiers, Brother Raul Urbano.
Thank you, Barry. It's wonderful to see
see so many people here. How's everybody doing? You know what? It's wonderful to see so many people here, and it's showing us that the work we're doing, which is building solidarity with Venezuela, which is calling out the imperialist policies of the US and the Canadian foreign policy in Latin America, the contradictory policies where it critiques Venezuela for human rights, but then around, for example, Honduras, Mexico, Colombia, it turns a blind eye to the violations of human labor rights in those countries. Why? Because we have lots of investment in those countries, i.e. mining. That's what keeps us kind of quiet when it comes to those countries. In Venezuela, we don't have that. So I think it's wonderful that there's so many people here, because it's showing that the work that we're doing is building and it's getting bigger and bigger, because you can't hold the truth down forever. And so the truth is starting to come out about what's going on in Venezuela. And so far CBC hasn't done the job that it should be doing based on what Barry said. It's funded by us, and it should at least at a basics do what journalists should do, which is some basic understanding, more nuanced about what's going on in Venezuela. So CBC and a lot of the mainstream media has sort of some historical amnesia, because they don't want to talk about, or they don't want you to remember all the achievements of the Bolivarian Revolution for the last 16, 17 years. They don't want you to know that in Venezuela, more than 65% of the budget goes towards healthcare, goes towards social problems, education, medicine for the majority of people, poor people in Venezuela. They don't want you to know that the Bolivarian Revolution is challenging the neoliberal model that has gripped us, the capitalist model, on a global basis. So it's looking at investing in social programs in the majority of the people. I think what's important for the CBC to understand is that we're not asking for much, really. We're just asking to present a basic nuanced understanding of what's going on in Venezuela. So if you're going to have a talk about Venezuela, at least at a minimum invite a Chavista or somebody that represents the government, so at least we can have a debate. The sad part about the international media, including CBC, is that it has tried to silence the biggest political force in Venezuela, which is Chavismo. No matter what anybody says, that is the biggest political force in Venezuela. As Barry mentioned, more than 8 million people voted for the Constituent Assembly. It's profoundly democratic and participatory, and that is something that I believe scares the mainstream media, including CBC, because if more countries were like Venezuela, then we would demand more from our elected government representatives. We would demand more from our democracy. So it's important to keep in mind when we talk about human rights, labor rights, that we also talk about a non-interventionist policy in Venezuela. The narrative of the right-wing, violent right-wing extremists from Venezuela, which are very similar to what we're seeing in Canada and under Trump, are doing the same things in Venezuela. For example, they've burnt people alive, they've shot people, they've dropped grenades from helicopters, they've blown up public buildings. These are extremely violent neo-fascist groups that want to hold down a democratic and participatory process. And I think as people within Canada, settler colony of this land, we have to support the majority of people who support the President Maduro today, which, as I mentioned, was over 8 million people. The elections are coming up in October, and you can bet that the opposition, which the mainstream media, really all it does is it parrots the narrative of the mainstream media, that Maduro is a dictator, that they'll do anything to hold to power. We know that those are lies, because the majority of Venezuelans continue to vote in parliamentary elections and presidential elections and regional elections for the socialist government of Venezuela, and that's what we have to hold CBC accountable, to present at least a nuanced narrative on Venezuela, to give ample opportunity for the representatives of the government or of Chavismo to counter the narrative of the right extreme media. We know that the right wing in Canada, Venezuelans, have lots of money. They have the support of the US. We know the US is aiding and abetting financially and politically in Venezuela. We know that the US is contributing. There are definitely challenges in Venezuela economically, socially, but we have to acknowledge that those are being exacerbated by US interventionist policy, right? So if we talk about that there's a lack of products, for example, in anywhere in Venezuela, we have to talk about why. Why are the business producers not producing them? Why are they hiding them? Why are they burning these products? These are the things that also have to be taken into account if we want to understand what's going on in Venezuela. So we're not asking for much. Really, we're asking for a tax-funded international media to come out with some clear and honest reporting on Venezuela, because what they're doing, directly or indirectly, are fueling the violence in Venezuela. They've emboldened
an extremist right wing in Venezuela that I mentioned has done, horrible crimes and won't stop at anything but to overthrow a democratically elected government. They have said from the beginning that they don't care about the democratic process. Their goal is to overthrow the democratically elected government of Nicolas Maduro. And as people in Canada, as people who love democracy, as people who love human rights, we have to do all we can to stand with the people of Venezuela, the majority of people of Venezuela who today support the democratically elected government of Nicolas Maduro. And I'm sure in the elections of October, they will again demonstrate that the majority of Venezuelans continue to support the Bolivarian process. Thank you.
That's it, Raul. And Raul is one of the people who occasionally chairs the meetings of the Toronto Venezuela Solidarity Committee. And we have a meeting tomorrow night at 7 o'clock at Oisey on the 5th floor. So if you want to hear more good stuff like that and participate in this movement, come out tomorrow at 7 o'clock at Oisey to the 5th floor lobby. Okay, somebody said, where'd you get that red shirt? Well, I'd like to say this Chavista red shirt from Venezuela, but actually I got it from the Jamaican Teachers Association. But it's in the spirit of the day, so I'm proud to wear red and be all in solidarity with Venezuela today. Our next speaker comes from the Louis Riel Bolivarian Circle. I ask you to warmly welcome Brother Francisco Suarez.
Thank you, brothers and sisters. On behalf of the Bolivarian Circle, Luis Riel, and on behalf of the Latin American and Caribbean Solidarity Network, and on my own, we are here to express full support to the Bolivarian process in Venezuela and full support for the democratically elected President Nicolas Maduro. We wanted to call the attention on all of those who only pay ears and eyes to CBC. We wanted to denounce CBC campaign of misinformation, misleading the public opinion, and battering lies against what is happening in Venezuela. Bolivarian Venezuela has proven something that the CBC and other corporate media never acknowledge. Bolivarian Venezuela has built more than 1,700,000 houses that have been already given to people in need within Venezuela.
Bravo.
It is important to highlight the following. Out of that 1,700,000 houses the Bolivarian process has built, many have been given to people who have came to Venezuela from neighboring countries where they have been displaced by paramilitaries, by all the forces that the imperialistic forces and its allies have been training to destabilize the zone or the region. That means Bolivarian Venezuela has given more effort, has given a lot of support, not only to the Venezuelan people, but to others abroad. Bolivarian Venezuela has launched what is well known as Petrocaribe, but which should be translated like a Caribbean Petroleum Regional Organization, in which Venezuelan petroleum, oil, and derivatives have gone to many countries in the Caribbean and in Central America and South America at a very affordable price and in conditions that never the imperialist forces had ever offered to countries like those in Central America, Caribbean, and South America. Petrocaribe, Misión Vivienda, or the 1,700,000 houses already given, is one of the proofs that the Bolivarian process has been working on behalf of the people, not only on behalf of Venezuelans, but on behalf of the people, even people in the United States. You may get surprised, but let me explain it. Venezuela, Bolivarian Venezuela, since late Commander Chavez was in power, has offered free oil to impoverished neighborhoods in the Bronx, New York, because we thought that escape from Bolivarian Venezuela, many residents and citizens from the United States would have perished under the cold weather in winter New York. Besides that, I wanted to highlight the following. It is not only Venezuela, but we, all the humankind, who are now facing the threat of fascism, Nazism, and ultra-right-wing positions and forces who have found on the despicable Trump support to the most heinous acts among the humankind. Trump has been encouraging ultranationalism, Trump has been encouraging Nazism and fascism, and Trump has been encouraging Islamophobia all over. We reject Nazis, we reject fascists, we reject Islamophobes. We are here standing with the peoples of the world who are for freedom, for justice, and we are standing here, and again we express our support to the Palestinian people. Long live to the Palestinian people. We also express our support to the Bolivarian people in Venezuela, and we express our support to the legally, democratically elected President Nicolas Maduro and his administration. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. And well said. CBC, stop the lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, stop the lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, stop the lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, stop the lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, stop the lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, stop the lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, stop the lies, tell the truth about Venezuela.
Stop the lies!
Thank you, Neti, on the drums. Thank you. Okay, many of us who are concerned about the truth being told about Venezuela are a little bit disappointed in the role that the NDP has played in recent days. To talk about that is a leader of the NDP Socialist Caucus, Elizabeth Bice. Please welcome Elizabeth Bice from the NDP Socialist Caucus.
Good afternoon, sisters and brothers, comrades and friends. Excuse me if I start coughing. I'm not feeling so well. My name, as Barry said, is Elizabeth Bice, and I'm speaking to you on behalf of the NDP Socialist Caucus, representing hundreds of left-wing NDPers. I'm the Socialist Caucus Federal Treasurer, and I'm also a retired member of the Canadian Union of Postal Workers and a past Secretary of the Toronto Labour Council. On July the 30th, over 88 million people voted in Venezuela to elect a National Constituent Assembly. That is more than voted for Nicolas Maduro in 2013, or for his party in the 2015 legislature election. It is 1 million more than the votes claimed in the fake referendum conducted by the right wing over a month ago. Sadly, the New Democratic Party foreign affairs critic Ellen Laverdiere called that vote illegitimate. Well, in light of the massive turnout, despite an organized right-wing boycott, and recognizing the achievement of the Bolivarian process, we must say that the NDP critics' criticism is illegitimate. It should be challenged across the Canadian workers' movement, and that is exactly what we are doing. On August the 23rd, the NDP Socialist Caucus demanded the resignation of the NDP Foreign Affairs critic. For months, Ms. Laverdiere has publicly expressed policy positions that are quite reactionary. In many cases, she has taken positions that violate NDP policies and principles. The latest in her effort, parallel to that of Justin Trudeau, the Liberal government, and that of Donald Trump, White House, to isolate, starve, and remove the popularly elected government of Venezuela. Shame is right, brother, shame. Eve Engler, a widely read Canadian foreign policy critic, exposed the record of the NDP spokesperson in an August 12th article. NDP foreign affairs critic marches in step with U.S. empire. I quote, Laverdiere certainly seems to support the U.S.-led geopolitical order. She's aligned with the empire on issues ranging from Venezuela to Palestine, Ukraine to Syria. Echoing Washington and Ottawa, Laverdiere recently attacked the Venezuelan government on the heels of Sunday's illegitimate Constituent Assembly vote. It's more important than ever for Canada to work with our allies and through multilateral groups like the OIS to secure a lasting resolution to the crisis, she told the CBC. But the Constituent Assembly vote wasn't illegitimate. Venezuela's current constitution empowers the president to call a constituent assembly to draft a new one. If the population endorses the revived constitution in a referendum, the president and all other government bodies are legally required to follow the new constitutional framework.
That's right.
Additionally, calling on Ottawa to work with our allies through the OIS may sound reasonable, but in practice, it means backing Justin Trudeau's efforts to weaken Venezuela through that body. In a June 2016 press release, Laverdiere said the OIS Secretary General, Luis Almagro, has invoked the Inter-American Democratic Charter regarding Venezuela and Canada as a member of the OIS, should support his efforts. But the former Uruguayan foreign minister's action as head of the OIS have been highly controversial. The previous head of the OIS, President Jose Mujica, condemned the Almagro bias against the Venezuela government. Laverdiere has also cozied up to pro-Israel groups. Last year, she spoke to the notorious anti-Palestinian labor lobby organization, American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Months after the AIRPAC paid for her to speak at their conference in Washington, Laverdiere visited Israel with Canada's Governor General, even participating in a ceremony hosted by the explicitly racist Jewish National Fund. The only Quebec MP to endorse Jagmeet Singh as next NDP leader. Laverdiere has attended other events put on by groups aligned with Washington. She publicized and spoke to the weirdly themed demonstration for human and democratic rights involved in Venezuela, in solidarity with Ukraine and Syria. Laverdiere supports deploying troops to the Russian border and repeatedly called for more sanctions on that country. She said the plan to send military trainers to the Ukraine sounds good in principle, and only called for a debate in Parliament about sending 450 Canadians to head up a 1,000-strong NATO force in Latvia. Excuse me. Since 2014, Laverdiere has repeatedly called for stronger actions on Russia, threatening to turn the Cold War into a hot nuclear confrontation. For all of these reasons, sisters and brothers, we call for her removal as NDP Foreign Affairs critic. We call on the 4 NDP leadership candidates to speak out and demand the same. We say, stop the lies, stop U.S. interference in Venezuela, end Canadian complicity. CBC, tell the truth. Self-determination for Venezuela.
Terrific job. And Elizabeth is struggling with a cough and a cold, and I think she did a marvelous presentation. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go.
Viva Chavez!
Viva Chavez! Viva que viva! Our next speaker comes from the Hugo Chavez People's Defense Front. Please join me in warmly welcoming Marta Palominos.
Good afternoon to everyone. How are you doing, guys? Good. Okay. The Hugo Chavez People's Defense Front raises its voice in rejection to USA's acts of aggression aimed to the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela and its right to establish the type of government that the majority of Venezuelans have chosen. The new sanctions are aimed directly at the heart of the Venezuelan economy, by preventing dealings firstly in new debt and equity issues by the government of Venezuela, and secondly at Venezuela State's oil company. The USA empire, once more, is on the wrong side of the history, blinded by its desire to dominate the world. In doing so, it willfully arms innocent people. We must also condemn the so-called opposition Venezuela formed by the extreme right wing. We call on the United Nations to raise voices against the outrageous abuse of power against Venezuela, that it also intends to be a warning to other nations. We call on the international community in general to openly express their rejection to USA sanctions and threats of military intervention in Venezuela. As a Canadian collective, the Hugo Chavez People Defense Front, chapter of Toronto, sends an appeal to the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to urge the USA administration to end all sanctions on Venezuela as they cause harms to all people, especially children. Canada should be mediating a party to end violence and bring peace to Venezuela. Ever onward to victory.
Thank you very much, Michael. CBC, no more lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. Okay, next we're going to hear from an activist whose native land is Colombia, and we want to talk about real harm that comes to trade union activists and human rights fighters. It's in Colombia, not in Venezuela. So I'm very pleased and honored to invite to speak to you a Colombian activist and a member of Socialist Action, Javier Pineda. Please welcome Javier.
Okay, my partners from the group, they asked me to speak in Spanish, so I will speak in Spanish. So, mi nombre es Javier Pineda, pertenezco a la local 4116 y estoy dirigiendo un mensaje de solidaridad del Grupo Acción Socialista. Luego de la constituyente se abre una nueva etapa en la historia del pueblo de Venezuela, con una afrontación y lucha de clases, con retos y pruebas para los revolucionarios y para la Venezuela en sí misma. Nicolás Maduro se dirigió recientemente en una locución al imperio diciéndole que no lo tomen por idiota. Es decir, el imperio ni la burguesía quieren la reconciliación y una salida civilizada. Ni se puede tener fe en la OEA o en una tercera vía. Ellos quieren la total destrucción de lo hasta hoy ganado y construido por el chavismo y el pueblo venezolano, como por la revolución bolivariana. Es hora que la clase obrera venezolana ponga en cintura a los explotadores, acaparadores, traficantes de drogas y banqueros. Es el momento para que los trabajadores le pongan fin a los violentos y a quienes quieren desestabilizar Venezuela, quemando, saqueando, contrabandeando y especulando con los bienes del pueblo. Nosotros condenamos la agresión de Washington y sus aliados imperialistas en Ottawa. Hablan de hambruras, caos y represión en Venezuela. Mentiras y exageraciones. ¿Acaso les preocupa la gente hambrienta de Guatemala, Salvador y Honduras y demás países de América Latina que tienen que dirigirse al norte para encontrar subsistencia? Si realmente les preocupa la democracia, deberían de no apoyar regímenes como Colombia, mi país de origen, donde el ejército y los paramilitares mataron y aún asesinan sistemáticamente a quienes piensan diferente. ¿Por qué el imperialismo no dice nada cuando removieron a la presidenta electa de Brasil, Dilma Rousseff usando un tecnicismo burocrático y colocaron un rapante y una corrupta figura en el poder. ¿Por qué no les importa la brutal y autoritaria monarquía saudí y para colmo les das armas para usar en contra del pueblo yemení? Como todos sabemos, Yemen ha sido aplastado por el imperialismo y las víctimas en Yemen son miles y miles. El soporte a Venezuela es crucial en estos momentos. El camino a seguir es el total poder en manos de la clase obrera. Es una revolución socialista el camino que debe tomar, como la tomó Rusia hace 100 años con el liderazgo de Lenin y Trotsky, y como igualmente Cuba ha forjado desde 1959 bajo la dirección de Fidel, Che, Vilma Spin. Como dijo el Che, la revolución debe ser socialista o será una caricatura de revolución. Naturalmente tenemos nuestras preocupaciones acerca de la revolución bolivariana. La burocracia y la corrupción es ya casi normal en todos los países subdesarrollados. Es una forma imperialista de sumisión. Pero lo que más nos preocupa es la colaboración con los sectores de la burguesía, que solo demora la expropiación de los medios de producción, la nacionalización de los grandes bancos, la expropiación de los terratenientes y el capital extranjero. Esto solo da alas a la derecha de organizar la contrarrevolución con ayuda del imperio. Recordemos 1973, Chile, Salvador Allende. No se tomaron las medidas necesarias y los fascistas se tomaron el poder con el genocidio de un pueblo y una revolución. Todos lo conocemos. La dirección hoy debe ser clara hacia el socialismo y nuestra tarea debe ser clara. Necesitamos trabajar unidos en Toronto, en el Comité de Solidaridad y llevarlo a todo Canadá. Necesitamos hacer más marchas, peticiones, caminatas, confrontar las mentiras de los medios y el gobierno. Debemos preguntarles a todas las organizaciones progresistas y obreras, pedirles que creen con nosotros un solo frente por la paz y no la intervención. Debemos abogar por la autodeterminación de los pueblos, por la autodeterminación de Venezuela. Respetar la constituyente de julio 30, Ottawa, Washington, fuera de Venezuela. Esto es lo que la acción socialista está haciendo con nuestros compañeros y con toda nuestra energía. Por tal, los invitamos a unirse a esta causa, el imperialismo fuera de Venezuela, por la autodeterminación de los pueblos, por la autodeterminación de Venezuela hasta la victoria siempre.
Thank you, Javier. Muchas gracias, Javier. Y bueno. Our next speaker comes from the Solidarity Against Fascism Everywhere. That's covering the whole, the whole ball of wax. Solidarity Against Fascism Everywhere, Juan Restrepo. Please welcome Juan.
Good afternoon, everybody. English is not my first language, so I'm gonna try. The destabilization against Venezuela continues as we are in here. Its initial phase was marked by the mobilization of violent groups demonstrating against the government. They killed ordinary passersby and even people who had joined their street protest. In the second stage, the big food distributors caused a shortage in the supermarkets. Later, deserters of the army made armed attacks against the headquarters of the Ministry of the Interior and the Palace of Justice, Supreme Court. They called people to rebellion, and as usual, they went into hiding. The international press has always attributed to the regime the deaths recorded during the demonstrations, although numerous video recordings show that they are deliberately murdered by demonstrators themselves. On the basis of this false information, the press described Nicolás Maduro as a dictator. Horse crap. As it did 6 years ago with the Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi and the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. It is the bet of the opposition, widely exalted by the war hegemonic press, as before with freedom fighters in Nicaragua, mosquitoes and death squads, and the Libya and Syria and Iraq. They lie shamelessly to obscure what is really happening in Venezuela. The temptation of the Venezuelan right to internationalize the conflict and to attract the military muscle of the empire gained new buzz with the recent declarations of the head of the Southern Command, Admiral Kurt Tilt, before the Commission of Armed Forces of the US Senate, and above all the appointment of Liliana Ayalde as a Deputy Chief of the Southern Command. I just want to mention who is this lady. The new Deputy Chief of the Southern Command, Liliana Ayalde, participated in the parliamentary coup that ended up with the democratically elected President Fernando Lugo in Uruguay. And she also was in Brasilia when the impeachment of Dilma Rousseff happened. So, fascist? Yes. We can see it in their methods, similar to those employed by armed gangs of Mussolini and Hitler to terrorize Italians and Germans by sowing and spreading destruction and death. Fascist for its political content, because its proposal is intrinsically reactionary in attempting to erase in a stroke all the popular achievement reaches from 1999 onwards. Fascist also because of the absolute immorality and unscrupulousness of their leaders, who fueled the fire of violence inside their bands of paramilitaries and thugs to attack the life and property of Venezuelan agencies and institutions of the states, such as hospitals, schools, public buildings, daycares, and so on. Fascist because they do not argue about the possibility of plunging Venezuela into a bloody civil war, or in the unlikely event of prevailing, make Venezuela an abominable American protectorate. Journalists and politicians who have endeavored to stimulate US interventionism in Venezuela should take full responsibility for their actions in the face of the possible US military intervention in the Bolivarian Republic. They should think of the carnage that caused the most recent Yankee direct intervention in Latin America country, Panama, where with the aim of capturing his former CIA agent, Noriega, hundreds of people were killed and wounded by the Marines in the deadly night of December 20, 1989. Before I finish, we all have heard how much of these supposed violations of the human rights by the Maduro government, but I bet that most of us have never heard by these liars how is the humanitarian crisis in Colombia. That's right. A country where in the northern Colombia desert, the children are dying of physical thirst and hunger. And you know why? Because the big mining companies just took the river for them. A country like Colombia, where the paramilitary groups and the army officially exterminated a whole political movement, Unión Patriótica, and is doing it now with the new political movement, Marcha Patriótica. A country in which during 8 years of Álvaro Uribe as president, there were more than 5,000 positive fakes. Positive fakes is when the army kills civilians and put them boots and a gun and accuse them of being guerrilla fighters just to prove results. Shame. A country like Colombia, where there is no humanitarian crisis according to these liars, where the paramilitaries rule from the Congress and even from the presidents. So where is the media? Oh, true. Colombia is a country under occupation, so they're happy with that. It is time for solidarity. All with Venezuela and all against the US imperialist intervention. ¡Viva Chávez! ¡Viva! ¡Viva Maduro! ¡Viva! ¡Viva Bolívar! ¡Viva! ¡Viva la revolución bolivariana! ¡Viva! Thank you.
Thank you very much, Juan. Let's hear it for Juan.
Gracias, gracias.
We're also very pleased to have present someone who's bringing... Okay. I think that means Maduro hit him hard, right? Hit the Yankees hard, right? Well, that's why they want to remove him, but he's going to keep on hitting. Well, we're pleased, very pleased to have with us someone bringing greetings from one of the largest unions in Ontario Public Service Employees Union, a militant in that union. I'm pleased to call upon Brother Sam Cheadle. Give him a welcome.
Thanks, guys, for having me. I'm not sure my consensus is shared with the whole union, but we try to push a more militant stance, and we work to distribute these narratives to the rank and file, who doesn't participate, along with a lot of the electorate, and about bringing these kids in and starting really fighting at the system that goes from Venezuela to Palestine to Toronto, where we're witnessing a massive coalescence of wealth from the 1%. and how do we break that open and start reinvesting in our communities in healthcare and militant trade union and the socialist, international socialism, and having solidarity with governments across Latin America that are fighting the same struggles. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sam Cheadle from the Ontario Public Service Employees Union. And now, before we hear our last speaker, a short poem from William. William, will you please honor us with your poetic skills? Okay.
Good afternoon, companions. We are here representing the peace, the poets for peace. And I am going to read for you a soneto. The title is La dictadura del lobo, the wolf dictator. Excuse me because I cannot speak in English the poem. La dictadura del lobo y su manada. Ustedes mismos sacarán las conclusiones. ¿A quién podría representar este poema? En una ovejera nación llegó un lobo malvado, hambriento y desaforado, y no tenía con ellas compasión. Una a una iban cayendo en sus voraces fauces, incontenibles. Las pérdidas eran ostensibles y hasta los pastores ya estaban temiendo. Era un lobo ladino, como todos los de su ralea, cuando se dan a la tarea de diezmar un campo bovino. Cundió el pánico por doquier, se prendió entonces la alarma, nadie volvió a tener calma, era como si hubiera subido Lucifer. Subió la delincuencia como resultante del hambre, los vendedores de votos un enjambre, y la justicia, bien, modelo de decencia. Y ahora, en esta laguna democracia, que ni Hobbes lo creería, la dictadura para el lobo estaría, oh ironía, en el lado oriental, gracias a su eterna falacia. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, William. As long as we have the poets on our side, we know we're going to win, right? Yeah. All right. We're going to hear now from our last speaker, but don't go anywhere because after that we're going to have some music. The Che Guevara song, right? Okay. So while that brother makes his way towards me, I'm going to call on our next speaker, and that is from the Latin American and Caribbean Solidarity Network, Marco Castillo. Marco, let's hear it for Marco from Laxon.
Gracias. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. The Latin American and Caribbean Solidarity Network brings a message especially to the media, to the newspaper, those who in the history of Latin America have played a big and bad role. The media in Latin America, especially following the US-led, have been part and played a big role against the democratic government. And we can recount so many cases. And we can remember now what happened in 1954 in Guatemala against the revolutionary and democratic government of Jacobo Arbenz, and what happened in Chile in 1952. They overthrew Salvador Allende, and when the invasion happened in Granada and they killed Maurice Bishop, the new cell was against the communists. And the same happened in Haiti against Aristide. Those cases we have in our memory. And that's why we said today, CBC, don't lie. CBC, don't lie. CBC, don't lie. And in Venezuela, when the new democratic, social and economic system began with the leadership of Hugo Chavez, they overthrew momentarily, but they did in 2002. And they still trying to overthrow the popular movement, the popular government of Nicolás Maduro now. And the media again is playing the role that they don't forget to play, because they follow the corporation, the rich, and the Department of State policies. And that's why we as a Latin American, you as a Canadian, and many other nationalities have to stand up and say, leave Venezuela alone. Leave Venezuela alone, and no to the intervention. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marco. Thank you very much. We're going to conclude with a song, but before we do that, Juan suggested, and I think it's a brilliant suggestion, we should gather for a photograph. So everyone at the far end, come together around the Hands Off Venezuela banner. Okay?
Come on in here, please.
Come in. Comrades, come in. We're going to be in a photo. And then we're going to have some music.
We want to send it to Venezuela and other countries so people can see their support for Canada. Everybody in? Everybody squeeze it a little bit more. Squeeze it a little bit more. Yeah, everybody. Otherwise, they're going to hit. CBC, no more lies.
CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. CBC, no more lies. Tell the truth about Venezuela. Well done, well done. And now we're going to hear the classic Che Guevara song. There's your brother. Come.
Yo soy Rolando Ágreda y Miguel Vázquez de Guatemala, y yo quiero que CBC diga la verdad de Venezuela. Aquí se quedará la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante. Vamos todos. Aprendimos a quererte desde la histórica altura, donde el sol de tu bravura le puso un cerco a la muerte y se quema la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Tu mano gloriosa y fuerte sobre la historia dispara,
la Santa Clara se levanta para verte. Se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Tu amor revolucionario con entrañas donde la firmeza de tu brazo libertario. Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara. Seguiremos adelante, como junto a ti seguimos, y con Fidel te decimos hasta siempre, comandante. Aquí se queda la clara, la entrañable transparencia de tu querida presencia, comandante Che Guevara.
Well done. Comandante Che Guevara, presente. Ahora y siempre. That means forever.
Tell them to get off the road. It's not safe. You get hit by a car.
Okay, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Thank you very much for participating.
You hear what I'm saying?
They're already off.
It's for their safety, and you're going to be
Why are you interrupting our rally?
Thank you very much. I won't take yes for an answer. Thank you all for coming. Over 100 people came here today to make our voices heard loud and clear. CBC, stop telling lies, tell the truth about Venezuela. And we can promise the CBC and all the media and the government of Ottawa and the big corporations, especially the Canadian mining corporations in Bay Street, we will be back. Continue the struggle, continue to tell the stories, demand justice, demand the truth. Venceremos!